Hi, Caleb with Brownells here, and in today's tech tip, we're going to be putting together a Glock frame. So the one in particular we're doing here is actually not a factory Glock frame, it's the St. Croix tactical frame that we carry. But this is a factory Glock lower parts kit, and everything about this is going to be pretty much exactly the same as a standard Gen 3 Glock frame, with the exception of the locking block. So this frame actually comes with the locking block. It comes with it installed. I just pulled it out to show you guys here, but that just presses right in there. We will have to take it out to get these parts in, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it back out. And to do that, you just take a punch or whatever. If you're using the Glock Armorer's tool, which is basically just a small punch, you can use that to take it out as well. But it just pries right out. We'll set that aside. Okay, so if you buy the factory Glock parts kit or any parts kit from Brownells, you got to get it from Brownells or it's not going to work. I'm just kidding, guys, but I encourage you to. So this being the factory kit, it comes in all these packages here because that's the way we package them for individual sale as well as the actual whole kit. So I'm just going to go ahead and start opening up parts. Alright, so here we have our slide lock spring. I'll just set these out on the table here. And then our combo parts kit, which has a bunch of stuff in it, and I'll tell you what's what, so you won't have to worry about that. Again, I'll just dump those out on the table. If you've never done this before, I'd recommend kind of keeping these separated, just to make things a little bit easier for you. But this is my 3,672nd Glock frame install. I'm just kidding, I don't keep track. It'd be kind of weird if I did. Especially without video evidence of all of them. Alright, and the trigger bar assembly there. Alright. Now we can put away our knife. You can use whatever knife you want to. You don't have to use a Microtech. It's, what the heck, go crazy. Do what you want to do. Just don't cut yourself. And if you do cut yourself, we sell first aid supplies as well. But you would want to get those before you cut yourself. It's a whole thing. Alright, where were we? What were we doing here? We were installing a Glock frame. Installing parts into a Glock frame. Alright, so kind of the first thing I like to do is go ahead and get the slide lock installed, which basically that's the levers in the front. That's your takedown lever. That's what you use to get the slide off of the firearm, which we're not going to cover slide today. We'll do that in a future video. So to install that, we're going to take the slide lock spring, which is this one right here, and you can see it has a tail that comes down at almost a 90-degree angle there, and then you have this front part that swoops up in the front, kind of like my hair. Alright, so whenever you go to install this, just remember the 90-degree goes towards the front and Caleb's hair is gonna go towards the back of the frame. Alright, so now you're never gonna forget that. It's super easy. And if you notice, I'll take a punch to point here. There's a cut in here, right in this spot right here. That's where the 90 degree is going to go into, okay? Alright, and we're just going to drop it in like so. And I'm going to use my punch to kind of help me push it in whilst trying to show you. Alright, so that goes in just like that. And that's what it should look like. Alright, now we're going to take the slide lock lever here. And if you notice, you have the bar that goes across with the serrated edges on the side here. And then you have kind of this flat paddle piece that sticks up right in the middle. Alright, one side of it, this side right here, is flat, okay? The other side of it has a notch cut in it. That notch is going to face the rear. Reason being is because your barrel lugs are actually going to interlock into that. So that's going to face the rear. And then on the bottom of it, there's a small notch cut in it. That's where that spring's going to sit. So here's what we got to do. Alright, with the notch facing the rear, we're going to insert it part way. Okay? Now we're going to take this spring here and push it all the way down so that it's underneath the lever we're inserting. Alright, and I got our lever started over there. I'm just going to kind of help manipulate it to get it going. And I'm going to push all the way through so that the lever comes out the other side of the frame. Just like that. Okay, so we have our levers sticking out. Alright, now we can pull those down. Just do a quick function check on the part here, and that's going to be done just by actually manipulating it. You should be able to pull these levers down and it springs back up. And that's what that notch looks like on the back when it's installed correctly. Okay, so now we can move on from here. That, like I mentioned before, I like to get that out the way first. Okay, so let's go ahead and install the magazine catch and the spring for that. So if you're using a factory Glock frame, chances are this is already going to be installed. But if you're using like a 80% frame or these here, you'll need to install that. So where this is going to go, and let me show you outside the gun here. So this is your magazine catch, and it's going to go in the firearm, right? And let me kind of manipulate it so you can see here. And we're going to need to put this spring in the frame, and then this spring's going to lock in like this. And that's all that holds the two together, just that notch. We're just going to notch in and hold it. Alright, so what we need to do now, and I'll show you the frame here, hopefully you'll be able to see this. So on the inside, against the front of this wall in the mag well here, you'll see a notch. And it kind of almost looks like a V for all intents and purposes here. That spring is going to go down into that V. Alright, so we'll sink it in. Alright, I'll just take it and get it started by hand here, and then I'll show you guys what I just did. And I'm going to use a punch to force it down. It's going to press into there just a bit. Alright, now that was one of those things that's almost impossible to show you on camera while I'm doing it, but you should be able to see that spring in that V now. Alright. So now what we need to do, if you notice on Gen 3 Glocks, you have one side for the mag catch that's cut out big, and one side that's cut out small. So you probably played this game when you were a toddler, but we need to match up the shapes. Alright, so obviously we can't get the big end through the small, so we got to come in through this large end here. And I'm going to take, making sure that that cut I showed you before is on the bottom, we're going to go ahead and slide this in, small end first. And we're going to kind of hit a stopping point trying to follow that trail there. And if you can see, it's hitting the spring. So we're just going to pull that spring back out of the way, slide this in further, and then I'll show you where we are on that step. And you can use some things to get this spring out of the way. You can use a pair of pliers, which is probably the most difficult way to do it. Or you can take in like an ink pen, where you can like click the head of the ink pen back. I'm explaining that terribly. Point is, you can use an ink pen without the actual like ink part, and use that to hold that spring. I'm using a roll pin starter punch, which does the same exact thing. And it's going to allow that to go in. I'm going to pull back, and I'm going to see if you guys can see what I'm doing here. Alright, so that's the, right now my punch my roll pin starter punch has that spring grabbed. And I'm just going to push the mag release in further. Alright, so now I'm going to use this punch to manipulate that spring into that notch. Alright. And this is actually best done with the flat punch, or your Glock armor punch, you know, whatever. And I'm just going to push it sideways and into the notch. It's super easy. It'll go right in. Alright, so I'm pushing into the notch. I said it's super easy, now I'm struggling. And also, if you don't have this spring pressed down all the way, it won't go in. There we go. And that's what it should look like now. Alright, so that's the those are the two hardest parts of this whole thing, and it's actually, you know, pretty easy. So what we can do now is go ahead and assemble our trigger and trigger housing assembly. Okay, so we'll need our trigger with the trigger bar. These will come installed together. And this is the trigger housing assembly, which basically just holds your connector and stuff like that. Alright, so what we're going to do here, if you notice, you have this spring here, right? And this spring, you'll have a hook that opens at one end here. Then you'll have a hook that opens on the opposite side on the bottom. So one's on the top, one's on the bottom. What we need to do is just take our housing assembly, and on the back there's a hole. So this right here will just hook right into it. So we'll hook on the bottom like this. Okay, and then once we have it facing like that, we'll just flip it over. So that cut is facing upward, okay? Alright, so I'm going to lift this up a little bit. What we need to do now, if you notice your trigger bar, you have a hole cut on the bottom right there. You're just going to grab it with this. We're going to feed this through that hole, and that's how these two things connect together, just like that. Alright, now we're going to take our connector, which is this piece right here, and there's a cutout on the side of your trigger housing assembly made just for this. So we'll set it on, press it in. It only goes on one way, super easy to do. Just like that. Now we can take this trigger bar and get this leg of it into the side of the housing here. And to do that, we're just going to kind of rotate like this and feed it in. And that's how everything should be assembled, just like that. And at this point, you can take a little bit of oil or grease or, you know, whatever gun lubricant you're using, and put it between these two metal surfaces here, just to make your trigger nice and smooth. Alright, now we need to get this inside of this. Alright, so what we're going to do, you'll see behind the mag well, you have a pocket. This is literally just going to drop into that pocket. And when it does, it'll put your trigger right through the hole for the actual trigger. It's super easy, so here we go. Dropping it in there. And at this point, you'll get a little bit of friction. Just press it. And it'll drop right in. Easy enough, right? Okay, so at this point, we can go ahead and take that locking block that we took out, and with the legs facing forward and the part with the hole drilled in it facing downward, we're just going to drop it in the frame. And you'll have to press it in. Just use your thumb, it'll go right in. Just like that. Okay, so the only parts we have left are these three pins. And yes, they are all different. And then our slide catch, or slide release. This is the extended one. This is a factory Glock extended one. You can use, you know, whatever one you want. Alright, so what I like to do first, if you notice, you have this pin here. Okay, and first thing, I'm just going to identify all three of these pins for you here, okay? You have this one that's straight in the middle with two larger diameters on each end here. Kind of almost looks like a barbell. Then you have the largest pin with two grooves cut in it. And then you have this small pin here, and this small one's actually made of plastic, okay? So this small plastic one is going to go through the back, right behind your grip there, right in the back of that mag well. And what this actually does is hold this trigger housing assembly in the back into place. So it's going to go through the frame and through that. And we're just going to press it in. You don't need to hammer anything, it'll press in. And you can use the back of your punch if you need a little bit more leverage on it. And pushing it in by hand. Just like that. And this is, you know, the first time you're installing these pins, so they're gonna be tight. They should be tight. That's fine. And that's what it should look like right there. Next pin we're gonna put in is gonna be that barbell looking pin. Okay? And it'll go in from either side, and it's gonna go in the top. So this is gonna go through your frame. And again, you can use the back of your punch to get a bit more leverage on it. You shouldn't need a hammer for any of these. If you're using a hammer, something's gone wrong. And I'll just push it flush here. And I'll go a little bit deeper on that one. Alright, that'll do right there. Okay, so before we install this pin is going to go through the locking block, through the frame, through the locking block, and through the slide release here, or slide catch. So, and I mean, I'm using different terminology here. Slide catch, slide release, you guys know what I'm talking about. The only thing is to make sure you determine the difference between your slide catch and your slide lock. That first thing we put in, that is called the slide lock. So a little bit weird how that goes there. Okay, so what we need to do, holding our slide catch just like this, we're going to insert it in between the actual trigger body and the frame, right underneath that locking block there. If you can see what I'm doing. Alright. And that's going to slide in place. And it should, the actual like paddle of it should sit right there. There's a cutout in the frame. That's where it should be. Okay. Now, from the opposite side that actual lever's on, we're going to come through the opposite way. And the reason we're coming through the opposite way is if we come through this way, we're going to have to get past both of those notches. If we come through from this side, the only notch we got to worry about is the one it's actually locking into. Alright, so I'm just going to push this in. This is going to go through the frame, through the locking block, through the trigger, and it's going to kind of dead end. Make sure it's going through the trigger here. You can just kind of look through the opposite side and watch your pin alignment. Alright, it's going to dead end into this actual slide catch, okay? This slide catch is going to be in the way. So you just got to kind of manipulate the hole to line it up. And you can do that just by, visually looking through the hole from the opposite side. And just apply some pressure. And sometimes what I like to do, especially with new pins, is to hold it against a flat surface while I do that and apply pressure. There it goes. Okay. Now we need to make sure that the actual slide catch is indeed in the notch on that pin. And I can tell because it's sticking out that it's not. So if you just gently push it, you'll feel it click into place. You may even be able to hear it here. Yeah, there it goes. Alright, so now That's installed. And that's it. That's the frame. So now all we need to do is the slide, and we can't really do a proper function check without the slide. So we'll save that for another video. And that's all there is to it. Alright. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.